everyone, and welcome to Atlantic Canada's Hydrogen Journey. Reimagined Energy is excited to bring you this podcast in partnership with the Atlantic Hydrogen Alliance, a not-for-profit organization working to advance clean hydrogen as part of Atlantic Canada's transition to a low-carbon future. And if you want to dive even deeper, don't miss the Hydrogen East Conference on April 14th and 15th that's taking place at the Halifax Convention Centre. It's taking place alongside Smart Energy Halifax, which is also a sponsor of the Reimagined Energy podcast. It's the perfect place to connect with stakeholders, hear the latest insights, and be part of the conversation shaping Atlantic Canada's hydrogen future. You'll find the registration link in the show notes.
Thanks, Maria. I'm Derek Estabrook, Executive Director of the Atlantic Hydrogen Alliance, and your host for this podcast series. The world is transitioning toward net zero emissions, and Atlantic Canada isn't any exception. That means big changes in how we produce, store, and use energy. We're going to need a lot more clean electricity, but here's the thing. We just can't electrify everything. Some sectors like heavy transportation, marine vessels, industrial processes, and long-duration energy storage are going to need other decarbonization solutions. And that's where hydrogen comes in. I think Atlantic Canada has what it takes to lead. We have some of the best wind resources in the world, deep water, ice-free ports. We have prime access to European hydrogen markets, and hydrogen really can help our region become a global green energy powerhouse. But the reality is we're still in the early days. So can Atlantic Canada turn hydrogen into a major economic driver? Can we scale up production? Can we attract investment and build a thriving clean energy industry? And when will we see a boom in hydrogen exports to Germany and beyond? And so that's what this series is all about. We'll talk to industry leaders, policymakers, and experts to get the real story. We'll cut through the hype, we'll tackle the challenges, and we're going to explore what's next. So let's get started, because the road to net zero is just beginning. Welcome to the first episode of Atlantic Canada's Hydrogen Journey. Today, we're going to be diving into Nova Scotia's green hydrogen sector to explore why the province and the rest of Atlantic Canada is embracing hydrogen. We're going to be talking about the current state of the green hydrogen sector in Nova Scotia, and also a little bit about what's on the horizon. Atlantic Canada has the right ingredients to be a major player in the global hydrogen economy. We have world-class wind resources, both onshore and offshore, ice-free deep water ports, and we have a prime location for exporting hydrogen to Western Europe. And this is why I've seen several large-scale hydrogen projects in development across Atlantic Canada. And these projects are mostly focused on producing and exporting green hydrogen and also hydrogen derivatives like green ammonia, green methanol, and sustainable aviation fuel. But green hydrogen in Atlantic Canada isn't just about exports. There's also potential to use hydrogen right here to help decarbonize sectors that are difficult to fully electrify, like heavy transportation, marine vessels, and heavy industrial processes. So to help us break all of this down, I'm joined by Dave MacGregor, Nova Scotia's Associate Deputy Minister of Energy. Since Dave's appointment back in 2022, he's been leading Nova Scotia's push for green hydrogen and other types of renewable energy by coordinating efforts across multiple government departments. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Derek. Pleased to be with you.
Okay. So to start, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your role as Associate Deputy Minister?
Well, a little over 20 years ago, I was the principal advisor to the Premier Ham, on energy matter, and then spent a considerable amount of time after that in the private sector, primarily servicing utility-based clients. So I was in the space, and Premier Houston called me and we were talking about hydrogen and offshore wind and some of the challenges he faced. And as we talked about it, he said, look, would you be interested in coordinating all of the various departments and the initiatives that would be required to get these two new fields off the ground? His concern was that this was too big a job for any one department. And that is absolutely true. It requires the coordination of a multitude of departments. And I was happy to join, participate with my colleagues in trying to get these two exciting fields that are directly related, offshore wind and hydrogen, off the ground.
Wow. Exciting. It does sound like a complicated role, trying to coordinate all these different departments. Can you tell us a little bit about what your work on green hydrogen involves from a
Well,
coordination standpoint?
one of the things that we often hear, things aren't going fast enough, and they never do. And we feel that way. But we have to remind ourselves that this is an entirely new energy field. There are no rules. And so we literally are making this up as we go along. There's more planning involved than that sounds, but in reality, there are no existing regulations on how to keep hydrogen production safe. There are no CSA standards. There are none of these typical things that you find in both industry, government, and safety standards. So it's an exciting time for everyone in the space, both industry, government, and the education sector. And we're very fortunate. We have Dalhousie University, for example, that is doing work with Eastward Energy as well as Everwind, but Eastward Energy in particular, in trying to develop these safety standards for this new energy source.
Right. Well, Nova Scotia's Premier, Tim Houston, has described green hydrogen as a way for Nova Scotia to become an energy powerhouse. And that's a pretty bold vision for a province that has historically relied on energy import. So could you tell us a little bit about how green hydrogen fits into the province's broader energy strategy?
Sure. The Premier is absolutely right. We have the biggest opportunity since, I would argue, since the age of sail. And to understand the opportunity is to look at our historical past. When were we successful as a province? And when we were the most successful, I mean national, when we were the most successful, we were prosecuting industries that we were the most efficient and best at. And most of that is natural resources. And the greatest natural resource that we actually have is, in fact, wind. There's a technical term called capacity factor, and that is essentially the consistency or the frequency that the wind blows. And our onshore wind capacity factor is approximately 60%. That is world class. But the exciting part is that offshore wind capacity factor is 70%. And there is some evidence, and we have to explore this further. There's some evidence that the offshore wind complements the onshore wind. That is, it blows at a greater intensity than the onshore wind, so it can balance each other out. Now, more work needs to be done to prove that up. But that is really what makes this exciting. And, where has Nova Scotia in the past failed? Well, we failed in economic initiatives when we tried to force certain technologies or certain businesses by having huge government grants and creating false expectations within communities because those industries were not self-sustaining. They did not have intrinsic value that could be world-class. But that's precisely what we have with wind. And that is in large part why we can become an economic powerhouse, not just an energy powerhouse, but an economic powerhouse if we execute this correctly.
So that's exciting. And maybe it's not surprising that some people are still skeptical. They're really skeptical about green hydrogen's role in Nova Scotia's energy future. So, how would you address that skepticism or those concerns?
Well, there's two main things that I hear, and I think a lot of this have heard. You know, it's not efficient to create renewable hydrogen. And the argument goes something like this. You have to have the energy to create the wind. Then you take that wind and you convert it to hydrogen in a hydrogen plant. And then you take that hydrogen and you use that energy to create ammonia so you can transport it. So you're taking hydrogen, mixing it with nitrogen, going through that process, and then you're putting it on a ship in a liquid form. It's no longer a gas, it's in a liquid form. And you send it over to Europe. And by the time that energy gets to Europe, you only have a third of the energy that you started with. And so people take that example and they say, well, how in the world is green hydrogen efficient? Well, let me ask you this. What is the number one occupation of the North American male? It's
North
truck
American
driver.
male truck driver. Wow.
Number one occupation. Canada and the United States, and I think the same is similar in Europe, but I don't know that for a fact. But it is a fact in North America. Why is that? They drive trucks that happen to be gas or diesel. You want to know what the most efficient gas engine is? Less than a third. The single most efficient gasoline and diesel engines on the planet today are no greater than 35% efficient. So when people say that green hydrogen transported to Europe is only 1/3, 33% efficient, I'll take it. That's what's driven our economy for the last 100 years. Actually, a little less. But you get the point. The second thing I hear, and this is what's really astounding when you think it through. There's certain groups out there that say we shouldn't take our natural resources. And first they say, take our natural resources and ship it abroad. We should green the grid first, green Nova Scotia first. Well, let's look at that. We're over 50% renewable energy today. And with the green energy wind projects the government announced 2 weeks ago, that takes us to 78% renewable energy already. So we're already there. What do you mean green Nova Scotia first? We're already on the road to being green. That's done. The second thing that they say is, why take our natural resources and ship it to Europe? That's astounding. Today, this very minute, our fishing industry is in a state of turmoil. We have $1.2 billion worth of exports that are now in jeopardy because of the trade tariff. You try telling those fishers, try telling those communities, we shouldn't be taking our natural resources and export them. We have to find new market in Europe. We need to find more markets, not less. And so that's, and the same is true with tires. I mean, who would think our number one export, a lot of people don't realize our number one export is tires, 1.6 billion. And again, today we're scrambling. What do we do with our exports? What do we say to those communities that are reliant on Michelin? We need to develop more exports and preferably non-American exports. And that's precisely what we're doing with hydrogen.
Interesting. So, I mean, that's a really ambitious and I think exciting goal. And I guess having a vision and a goal, that's a great place to start. But you really need kind of plans and actions to bring that to life. So to get started on that path, Nova Scotia released its Green Hydrogen Action Plan back in late 2023. So could you just kind of walk us through a few of the key priorities from that plan and how that plan can help accelerate growth of the hydrogen sector here in the province?
Sure. The green hydrogen plan, we felt we had to put a document together to show Nova Scotians exactly what we're working on and what the steps are. But importantly, what I'd like to do is share with you some of the goals straight from the action plan. Because the goals in the action plan delineate exactly how we're going to execute this and what we expect the benefits for Nova Scotians will be. And so, obviously, the first goal is to create the conditions for a sustainable and prosperous green hydrogen sector that produces local benefits and ensures a strong domestic workforce so that we do the training to get the people in place. And additionally, we'll support the development of a competitive green hydrogen export market. And so we're going to assist in that regard where we can. We're also going to ensure that the green hydrogen sector is developed in alignment with Nova Scotia's environmental and climate change goals. And that's really where hydrogen, I think, in the long run is going to be of the greatest benefit. It's a zero emitting fuel. It requires no additional processes. In other words, you don't have to have carbon storage or some other process to deal with carbon because there is no carbon generator. We're also going to support engagement and efforts to foster transparent dialogue with communities, First Nations, fishing communities, anyone that wants to talk about this sector. We're more than interested in engaging. There's a total of 7 goals, but those are the top 4. And I would really encourage, and I'm happy to read the rest, but uh, I'd really encourage your listeners to pick up the Green Hydrogen Action Plan, and I'd also encourage them to pick up the Offshore Wind Action Plan because the two are really hand in hand.
Okay. I've got a couple follow-up questions about the plan. If you think about how Nova Scotia positions itself as a leader in green hydrogen, what do you think the biggest economic opportunities are going to be? Like, will it be job creation or investment or some combination of that?
We have what I believe, and the Premier has clearly articulated, the greatest economic opportunity that our province, has seen in a very long time. And the reason and the answer to that question is both. It's not only jobs, but it's also attracting in industry. And I don't want to wonk out too much, but this is one thing that really isn't discussed in Nova Scotia. If you look at our electrical grid, our peak production is 2,400 megawatts. But in the off peak, that goes down to only 800 megawatts. That system is only 33% fully utilized. What does that do? That increases the cost of our electricity. Our capacity or our utilization rate is only 33%. That's the lowest in the country. Lowest. We're tied technically with Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick. The highest utilization rate is Alberta, Ontario, BC, and Saskatchewan. You want to know what else they're the highest in? They're the highest in GDP per capita. And I fully believe that there is a direct correlation between your electricity utilization rate and GDP per capita. The reason being is that our load factor is so low. It's because we don't have manufacturing and large-scale industrials to the extent that they do in other provinces. And what do they bring? They bring not only jobs and additional investment in our province, but what they bring is additional opportunities, and they take the pressure off our electricity rates. And so I see this as the catalyst for a comprehensive economic development strategy. It is truly creating an energy hub that attracts additional industry. And once you get that going, it is a bit of a snowball effect. And that's what our province has been missing. We've been shooting for things that we're not economic in. And what we're trying to do is focus on what we are the very best in the world at, which is wind energy, renewable energy, and that will be the real catalyst that keeps our economic growth growing. We got to get off this GDP problem. And I keep saying GDP, but really what I mean is the average income of Nova Scotians. You know, the average income of Nova Scotians is $29,900. That is staggering. That is the lowest in the country. We're tied with Prince Rudolph. We need to fix that. And green hydrogen, offshore wind, converting our energy system to a renewable and affordable energy system will be that economic catalyst.
Interesting. To build on that point, and you mentioned that one of the goals in the Green Hydrogen Action Plan is to develop the hydrogen export sector. How well positioned do you think Nova Scotia is to kind of leverage some of the advantages that you've talked about and enable us to compete in the global hydrogen market against North Africa or the Middle East or other parts of the world?
That's an excellent question because we are in a race. For a commodity-based product, you really have to be first to market. And our team, my colleagues, and the industry, and the Atlantic Hydrogen Alliance, your organization, we're all working together to be first to market. And we're competing with NEOM in Saudi Arabia, a whole bunch of smaller projects in Europe, as well as South America. There's a couple of projects in the U.S. They're running into some challenges now, but so there's a number of projects. The Everwind project is probably the most advanced project, period. It has its environmental assessment complete. It has the very expensive and extensive front-end engineering design complete. That is huge. What we're waiting for now, and as I shouldn't say wait, what the proponents are pursuing now is what we all call an offtake agreement, or what everybody else in business calls sales. And so when we get that offtake agreement, we're in a good position to get that plant up and running.
Right. Yeah, let's switch gears. We've been talking a lot about export opportunities. And when it comes to the domestic hydrogen sector, so using hydrogen here in Atlantic Canada, one of the biggest challenges that we face is kind of this chicken and egg problem where hydrogen producers need to build supply, but it's difficult and risky for them to build that supply when the demand is still developing. So what role do you think the province has to play in helping address that problem to kind of bridge the supply-demand challenge?
I think we all have a role to play in this. And this is one of the things that some groups out there, we need to hold more people accountable. We really, truly do. Addressing climate change is too important an issue to allow charlatans to skirt with the truth. We went through this problem over 26 years ago. The exact same problem was discussed. And what I'm talking about is the Maritimes Northeast Pipeline. 1999, December 1999 was first gas from the Sable Offshore Energy Project. And in the years running up to that important date. A lot of community people, I shouldn't say community people, there was a few people out there that were saying, wait a minute, why would you take our natural gas and ship it to the United States? That's not right. That's our gas. We should use it right here in Nova Scotia. And they're right. But here's the thing. These infrastructure projects are incredibly expensive. The Sable Offshore Energy Project was $2 billion in 1999. The Maritimes Northeast Pipeline Project was $1 billion. Can Nova Scotia sustain those types of numbers? No. But what did we do? We allowed the American market to build the infrastructure so it became affordable for Nova Scotia. And as that project was built on the economics of supplying gas to the United States, what immediately happened? What immediately happened was Maritimes Northeast did a deal with, made a sale with Nova Scotia Power, 60,000 million cubic feet a day for Tufts Cove. So Nova Scotians were able to afford, and that was good for ratepayers and it was good for Nova Scotians. And what occurred in 1999 is what will occur with hydrogen, because we are allowing the Europeans to pay the enormous capital costs. Phase one is over $3 billion. Allow the Europeans to pay for the infrastructure required to produce this hydrogen, and that will make the hydrogen affordable for Nova Scotians. And believe me, the Premier's made it abundantly clear to every hydrogen proponent that hydrogen must be made available to Nova Scotians, and it needs to be affordable. And if we follow this plan, that's exactly what we'll have.
So would you say then that it's really not a choice between deciding whether we produce hydrogen exported or whether we produce it to use domestically, that those two goals are actually quite complementary?
Absolutely complementary. We, Nova Scotia is only 1 million people. Europe's 300 million. We cannot sustain a $3 billion phase one cost. That capital cost, we cannot, it's just impossible. But if we develop the European market, allow them to pay for it, that's what makes it affordable for Nova Scotians.
Okay. Well, this has all been really interesting. I want to end by looking ahead, and I'll kind of say this with a caveat that we're living in really uncertain times, both geopolitically and economically. To that extent, it's difficult even to forecast what might happen tomorrow, let alone 5 or 10 years down the road. But still, when you look kind of into the future, what excites you most about Nova Scotia's future in the green hydrogen sector?
Wow. There's a lot of there's a lot of different areas. The research and development, the building of new skill trades. But I guess for me, I'd have to say it's the economic opportunity. My daughter has a degree. She's smart, well educated, hardworking. Same with her cousins. Same with her friends. But they're all struggling. Every single one of them. And I go back to the average income of Nova Scotians, 29,900. We need to address that. People talk about affordability, but it's all talk. We need to take action. And our greatest opportunity to grow the average income of Nova Scotians is right here through the renewable energy transition. And hydrogen and offshore wind plays a significant role in that. And that will forever create a continuing economic dividend for this province. It's not every day somebody gets a do-over. And I'm lucky enough to have a second chance at trying to make sure that Nova Scotia has an economic opportunity in the energy field. And this by far is it.
Well, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate you taking time to join me on this, our first episode of Atlantic Canada's Hydrogen Journey. And to the point you just made, we really wish you and the province well in your drive to transform Nova Scotia into an energy powerhouse. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Derek.
That was a really interesting discussion with Dave. I appreciated his perspectives on the opportunities that green hydrogen can bring to Nova Scotia. I also appreciated that he highlighted the challenges that we're going to have to tackle first. I guess my two big takeaways from this episode were that one, green hydrogen could be Nova Scotia's biggest economic opportunity since, as Dave said, the age of sail. Historically, Nova Scotia has thrived when it leverages its natural resources, and today, its greatest resource is the wind. And by harnessing wind energy to produce green hydrogen, the province can become both an energy leader and an economic powerhouse. My other big takeaway is, unfortunately, a bit more sobering, that Nova Scotia is tied for the lowest GDP per capita in Canada. And I followed up on this and discovered that Nova Scotia's GDP per capita also trails every U.S. state. But Dave thinks that green hydrogen, paired with offshore wind, could change that sobering reality by attracting investment, creating jobs, and boosting the province's economy. So those were my big takeaways. Maria, what else did you take away from this interview?
Well, I got a couple of them, and here are my two. And it's really around how when you're building a new industry like green hydrogen from scratch, it takes time and there's a lot to be done, as Dave acknowledged. And the other one is how, exporting green hydrogen to Europe and how it can help fund local infrastructure, to help lower hydrogen costs for businesses and industries right here in Nova Scotia.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. You're becoming a pro at this, so it's really great to have you on board. The other thing I want to mention as well is if you want to learn more about Atlantic Canada's hydrogen future, don't miss out on the Hydrogen East conference that's taking place April 14th and 15th at the Halifax Convention Center. It's taking place alongside Smart Energy Halifax. And you'll find the registration link in the show notes. So thanks again, Derek. We'll see you again soon.
Okay, next week.
Great.